with comedian Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So I've talked about this dude a couple of times, EvanWritesOnX. And if you spend any time on Twitter, just go and follow this dude because he's so fucking prescient and rational, and his analysis is so fucking on the money all the fucking time that I don't even know where it's coming from. I don't even know who this dude is. I started following him because a couple of other dudes I follow are like, this guy is the absolute man. One of the guys was Shahid Bolson, who is he's like a Muslim dude. I think he is an American, but he converted to Islam. And he's a little bit of a shady character, but he has some interesting shit to say. But he was like, this Evan dude is unbelievable. And also this other guy, Simon Dixon, who is basically a Bitcoin dude. He was also like, this Evan guy's on the money with everything. And so I've been following this dude for fucking a while now. He's got 14,600 followers, and that fluctuates 200 or 300 up and down. But it's a private account, and this is what it says on it. He says geopolitics, private sector analysis, game theory. Analysis does not equal advocacy. Anyway, if you do get accepted by this dude, the first thing you need to read is his pinned tweet. But anyway, the reason I'm talking about him is because he probably has written the most insightful and the most brutal thing about this whole Epstein saga, scandal, fucking horrific crime that I've read. So I'm just going to read out his post about the Epstein thing, and I just think it's interesting enough to spend some time reading it out. You know what I mean? Haven't you had enough things read out this week? Especially on Friday? All right, here it is. This is fucking some random dude who I follow for geopolitics on Twitter, and he's anonymous, so make of it what you will. So he's written it in response to someone posting a picture of Epstein with like a fucking toddler. The thing's getting fucking hectic. Anyway, he says this Epstein case is revealing very naive people who clearly have no idea how the world works. By the way, some of his analysis is absolutely fucking brutal, like emotionless. He's like, I'm not making things up. This is just literally how things work. This is how power operates. And a lot of the time you're like, can you just fucking fluff it up for me a little bit? Because this is fucking rough. And then he cops so much shit in the comments from a lot of people because they just don't want to hear it. Anyway, this Epstein case is revealing very naive people who clearly have no idea how the world works. My timeline is full of these people outraged. If you're outraged over the Epstein files, you should not be engaged in this matter at all. Like, what did you hope to think you would find? Epstein and his friends having a harmless picnic with the children? Do you even understand why such a syndicate exists in the first place? What you're being shown is probably a fraction of how depraved this organization really is. And that's the point. It had to be as depraved and as morally reprehensible as possible. Otherwise, there's no point of it existing. If perversion didn't exist to the extent where people get sick by it, there would be no leverage in the first place. So being shocked by this just outlines you're the average Joe, that you don't understand power or how it exerts itself. The system that arrested and eliminated Epstein is the same system that constructed him, ground up. Epstein was not real. If Epstein was real, this level of network, the depth and breadth, would be impossible to achieve. He was a complete asset construct and nothing was accidental or random. He was positioned as the ultimate connector, enabling leverage and power exertion across every major sector: tech, finance, media, entertainment, politics, education, health. Extraordinarily high asymmetric leverage through blackmail, adjacent channels, and elite facilitation. Complete entanglement within figures from competing factions, whether it's the left or the right, US, Israel, old money, new money, the technological industrial complex, the financial industrial complex, the military industrial complex. He literally created a mutual deterrence web, engineering a cross-sector independent hostage situation where participation begets silence. Silence that ensured no one could ever defect or expose one another without self-destruction, preserving their own systemic impunity and profit continuity in a finite game world where alliances are otherwise fragile and transactional. No single player could fully expose any counter-faction or even abandon Epstein without risking collateral damage to their own network. That's why, even post-death, the releases remain ever so carefully curated. Epstein was essentially designed to build a private intelligence insurance scheme for the elites. They got introductions, contracts, deal flows, and plausible deniability, while Epstein got protection and capital. And when the liability finally outweighed the utility, the system shed him cleanly. Suicide narrative sealed. Dead men tell no tales. Estate photos selectively leaked years later as controlled demolition. I don't know why people are shocked from these photos. What's hidden and will remain hidden is far more sickening by design. This isn't about normalizing pedophilia. This is about normalizing perversion. The girls were a means. Silent compliance was the end. Depravity was the non-negotiable feature of this syndicate to achieve those ends. The sicker, the more depraved the act, the more leverage it exerted. It wasn't up for debate. It wasn't an option. It wasn't permission. It was mandatory to do the unthinkable. Without the unthinkable, there's no binding glue strong enough to enforce silence across competing factions. The job description was simple, and they found that one guy called Epstein willing to take it on and glue it all together. Everything, no matter how depraved, has always been permissible in the West. Nothing to be outraged about. So I don't know how much more on the money you can get than that. But I will just read one more thing, because that final line he actually wrote a qualifying post explaining that last fucking line. Nothing to be outraged about. So I'll just read that because that's kind of interesting as well. Oh no, it wasn't exactly about that final line. He wrote something else and he said moral outrage is what gives the system power. And then he went on to qualify what he meant by that. Moral outrage is what gives the system power. And this is what he said about that. I want to clarify this statement because I just realized how twisted it can sound. I'm not saying we shouldn't be morally outraged over what Epstein did. I'm saying that the system relies on our moral outrage for the leverage to be functional in the first place. You have two kinds of people. People who are morally outraged at the files and what Epstein did, and people who reserve their moral outrage on what Epstein did because they know it's the architects of Epstein's construct that orchestrated this whole thing. The former aids and complements the system that created Epstein. The latter disintegrates it. Unfortunately, the former are the masses. The latter are the very small minority. Epstein is not the problem. He never was. So he's basically saying, well, he's actually saying a lot of things there. He's saying Epstein was just a creation of the system. And also he's saying the system uses your morality as leverage to hold the system together. So I don't know how you untangle yourself from that fucking mess. But basically the idea is the system uses these horrific, unspeakable acts as, well, fucking as a trust building exercise amongst the elites, so they know that nothing will ever get too out of control amongst them because they all have some horrific thing hanging over their heads. And that is built into the system. You're not even allowed in unless you're a part of that. So don't worry about the Democrats, the fucking Republicans, the tech billionaires. Don't worry about the difference between Bezos and fucking Zuckerberg. They are all in on it. They're not allowed in unless they are. It's the system. That's how it works. If it's not Epstein, it's someone else. Epstein's already been replaced. There's already someone doing the job he was doing. Anyway, go follow EvanWritesOnX for some cheerful analysis. That'll fucking do for tonight. And I'll see you the fuck later.